And Laura Trump joins us now. Laura, great to have you with us. What's your take on this obvious concern about what's going on in the economy and where the president's focus is? Clearly, after the election, there's a lot of discussion about affordability. The president's talked about a lot over the past couple of days. And, as you think about that, I just want to put up this screen, which shows the prices change since President Trump took office. Eggs down considerably. The 30-year fixed mortgage is down considerably. Oil prices are down considerably, which he talked about over the last couple days. Coffee and beef are higher, as is shelter. What's your take on this situation, Laura?
Well, look, I think this is a president, Martha, who's always talked about bringing back the American dream, right? And what is that? That's home ownership. That's starting a family. That's generally being better off than your parents and your grandparents were. And unfortunately, for a lot of Americans, it was going in the wrong direction for a long time. You saw President Trump take steps during his first term to rectify that in so many different ways. And it did feel like we were heading back in the right direction. Of course, Joe Biden came into office and completely wiped out any gains that were made in that space. So to our vice president's point, yes, it takes a little bit of time to get our feet back under us and to right all the wrongs that were done. But you're seeing it happen. Whenever you think about what it takes in order to turn the economy back around, you talk about things like investment in America, which this president has seen time and time again, leveling the playing field when it comes to trade. How many trade agreements has this president seen signed and, now in effect that's benefiting our country? We're talking about better jobs and higher paying jobs and deregulation. I don't know that we talk about that enough. If you look back to President Trump's first term, if you guys remember, for every one regulation that was implemented, they removed 7. Right now, for every one, it's 10 that gets removed. So what does that do? That makes it more affordable to build. That makes, all of these regulatory burdens and the red tape removed from that process. That is going to benefit the American people in this big way. And I think we're going to start to see the impacts of that very soon.
Especially on gas prices. It's interesting if you have a chance to travel around the country a little bit. New York is one thing, but then you get out and it's a lot less expensive in other places. But things like bananas and coffee, that's two of the things that Scott Bessent this week said President Trump's going to lower some of those tariffs. We don't produce those things here, and those costs are going way up. And is that a tactic that you think the president and the team might use in order to combat people like Zohran Mamdani, who made affordability the center of their campaigns and try to say that they were the ones that could provide that for you?
Well, I think people are going to quickly see, Dana, that the way that Zohran Mamdani is going to approach things from a socialist perspective are not going to work out. I think it's time will tell. People are going to have a front row seat in America to why it doesn't work just right there in New York City once he takes office. But yeah, look, I think the tariffs have been leveraged. The tariffs have been a tactic in order to get a lot of these trade deals across the finish line, which has been effective for this country. But this is a president who's always kind of nimble and is always looking at things and reassessing. And if there's something that's working, he wants to continue that path. If there's something that's not, or maybe it's hurting the American people in the moment, he'll reassess it. And I do think that that's what he's going to continue to do. And look, I think this is going to be, as we head into next year's midterms, which is what everyone is talking about, this is going to be about championing the things that have gone right via the Republican Party. There's so much to brag about. There's so many wins. We have to continue talking about them and reminding the American people that if you like the way so many of these things have gone, you can't stay home during these midterms. You have to get out and vote.
Laura, would love to turn your attention to this interview that Katie Couric did with John Fetterman. You and I spoke about Senator Fetterman the other day, and you did an interview with him recently. But here he is pushing back with her as she tries to sort of box him in on Charlie Kirk. Watch this.
Did you have any issues now in hindsight over some of the things that Charlie Kirk said and some of the rhetoric he used during his life?
I didn't agree with much of it. I didn't closely follow his specific kinds of views, but I did.
I'm sure you learned about them after his death, though.
No, I haven't done a deep dive on it.
I think some people might say Charlie Kirk's rhetoric was extreme. I think that's the conversation that happened. People condemned political violence, but they also felt a great deal of discomfort with his language.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we agree that we probably didn't agree with much of what he said, and I think I'm sure we both agree that you shouldn't shoot people, and you shouldn't execute them in public.
Yeah. The language, a discussion with Katie Couric that ends with the most horrible political violence that we've seen in a very long time, which is not really acknowledged on her end of that conversation, Laura.
Maybe Katie Couric should do a deep dive into what Charlie Kirk stood for, because he stood for freedom of speech. No matter what it was you were saying, he would go into these college campuses, into these bastions of liberal ideology, and he would want to engage with people. He did it peacefully. He did it respectfully. He believed in America. He believed in God, in Jesus. And there's nothing that he said or ever, talked about with people that was outrageous. So maybe she wants to go back and look at this. But the idea that she was essentially trying to get validation from John Fetterman there for Charlie Kirk's murder is kind of outrageous. I don't even know what the point of any of that was, but it kind of goes back to, how we got to this spot in the first place, where we saw a young father assassinated in cold blood. It's because people continue to push this idea that somehow there's a problem with that and maybe action should be taken. That was really shameful and pretty disgraceful and disgusting.
Well, and more for you to maybe talk about this with Andrew Colvett. He'll be on your show this weekend. Of course, he's the TP USA spokesperson, as well as Doug Collins, Nick Daniels, and Dave Portnoy. What else can we expect?
Yeah, well, listen, we're talking with Nick Daniels about when we're going to see things open back up in this country fully for aviation. I think those of us who travel, I do multiple days a week, want to know all about that. Of course, Dave Portnoy has just had a couple of recent anti-Semitic attacks against him. He's talking about that and what he expects to see out of New York City. And then VA Secretary Doug Collins is talking about some new treatments that are on the horizon to help our veterans. 17 veterans a day take their life. That is 17 too many. And we're trying to reverse that, I think, over the next 3 years for sure. So he's going to talk all about it Saturday night at 9 p.m. I'll see everybody there.
Sounds like a great show.
My View on Saturday with Laura Trump. Thanks for being here.
Great to see you, Laura. Thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.